everybody fights with finance to get more money, but I think they need to have this overall competence as well. And I think that's one thing that when I talk to AI Sweden or others, they compare us to other countries. They say that they have more of these resources in like government and on the prime minister level, and we really don't. We have 2 people, I think, in that works there. So it's creating a problem. And it's the same as you do in a company. You put AI in the IT department, and it is everything. But it is, of course, you have to have a lot of processing power, but it's basically changing the way we do things. So it's more on the business side, and I think it's still a lot of companies. And also, if you look at municipalities and regions in Sweden, they also push it towards the IT departments, and I think that's that needs to change on all levels.
Where is AI mainly located, you would say, right now in the Swedish government? In which department? Or
it's in the civil service department with Secretary Slottner.
And how big is the interest or discussions about AI in different departments, you would say?
I don't think I think it's discussed in education a lot because of like ChatGPT got a lot of attention with people making it easy for themselves writing essays and stuff, but it's not discussed as something that actually could enhance education in that way. So I think that's about the only department where I've heard it. We discussed it actually today when we met with the Secretary of Infrastructure with regards to using data from trains to make change out parts of the rails earlier, because you can tell how the trains are moving if you start collecting that data, which actually they have available.
Data-driven maintenance.
Yeah, data-driven maintenance. You could actually avoid a lot of delays and train stops. So, and there are companies that are using AI to do that, and other countries that are looking at it as well. So I think that's something that we need to look at, because everybody who commutes by train, there's problems.
We all know about the annoyances.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. Like, we have AI now in one in one department, which happens to be the infrastructure department. And one way to approach this is actually, I have a really hard time from my department to influence the use of AI in all the other departments. I should, but it's very hard. But I could potentially show the way by really understanding how this works, by simply pushing it into all my sub-departments under my head. So if Erik Slottner really understands AI, he could potentially understand, step one, how does all my different department, from the train to the buses to the boats, so to speak, as you said, use AI.
Yeah, but that would be Andreas Karlsson, who's the Secretary of Infrastructure, but they should be working together.
But it's
I understand.
Interesting idea that sometimes we cannot solve world peace at day one, right? We need to figure it out how to get started, and then sometimes you can get started.
Yeah,
interesting idea.
I think it's interesting if you think about in a normal private sector organization and companies, they always struggle with this IT department and then having different other departments of the company. But then you have these kind of cross-functional, technologies like data in general or AI, and it really needs to be intersecting all of them. So you have these kind of different dimensions.
Yeah.
And I guess you need to have that in the government as well. Really.
Yeah, I think so. And it's still, we have the silos. And that's why I say I think these resources should be in the Prime Minister's office so that it can work on a more overlaying all the different departments. But I'm hoping that we can influence that in the end.
Either that, or you have this kind of cross, matrix kind of organizations, right?
But I think that takes a longer time. Changing government, the way they organize things, I think that's it's a very conservative world, and I think that would make. I know they changed around a little bit after the election, and there was a lot of discussions, and people were unhappy. And
there was a lot of on every election. There's some sort of slicing of the cake differently, and sometimes some people get really upset on where they
end up. Yeah, so.
Yeah, super interesting topic. And with that, I'd like to welcome you here.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here, Maria Stockhaus. You're a spokesperson for matters of digitalization, I guess, right, in the Moderate Party.
Yes.
And it's actually the first time, as you said, that we have such a prominent politician on the podcast. So it's a true honor to have you here. And I guess you've been an active politician for like 20 years? Or?
Yeah, I've been I started with the youth organization when I was 14 or 15, but I've been full-time politician for actually almost exactly 20 years. So long as most part of my career has been in politics, and it was just sort of by accident. It wasn't really where I was.
I'd love to hear more about that. And then also you've been in the Swedish Parliament for like 10 years? Or
yeah, no, it's my third term, so it's 8th year now. Yeah. Or ninth, sorry, yeah.
It's really extensive experience, so it's awesome to have you here and speak more about that. But perhaps you can start with that. How did you get started with that? Or really, who is Maria Stockhaus? How would you describe yourself?
It's hard to, I wanted, I'm not one person to just accept status quo. I want to change things. And I think that's probably what sort of attracted me into politics, trying to make things better and change things. So that's really what drives me, I think, right now. I'm starting to get old, which is kind of hard to accept. I turned 60 in a couple of weeks, and it's really wow. It's really, but the alternative is not very attractive. So I think I'm happy to be turning 60, and I think I have a lot of experience and trying to put them to good use in where I am today. And I think that's it's good to have all that experience and maybe not get so upset about the smaller things that happens around you all the time.
Do you remember where in your career, or let's see now, when we had the digitalization boom around the 90s and 2000 with Birgersson and Framtidsfabriken, and we had the broadband revolution and everything like that. Where were you at that point in time in your career?
I was actually working at IBM. Or I started at Lotus, Lotus 1 to 3, Lotus Notes. Yeah, we got bought up by IBM in 1995. So I was working at IBM. But I'm not a tech person. I'm a business person. So I was working more on selling sort of education. When people bought Lotus Notes, they needed to get trained, and we needed to get IT guys trained on Lotus Notes so they could develop cool applications for our customers. So I was sort of in charge of selling these education services around Lotus Notes.
So you were politically active since, of course, the youth, but you were in business, sort of say, and in the earliest times of your career. So in IBM. Yeah. And how was the transition from business into professional politician, so to speak?
Well, I was in the municipalities here in Sweden. A lot of people are active in politics, but most of them do it as a sort of their hobby in the spare time. And I think our democracy wouldn't work without all these people dedicating a lot of their free time to the municipal politics. And I was one of them. I was, and then after the election 2002. One of the persons in charge of sort of trying to find out who to put where after the election. It's like a big puzzle.
Reinfeldt, no?
Yeah, no. This was the year, the election that went very, very bad for us. But we still had we were still in power in Sollentuna where I live. Okay. So they were looking for somebody to take charge of being, I guess, chairman of the school board, and that was a full-time position. So, and they asked me if that was something that I would consider. That was 20 years ago, and well, my mom always said that you usually regret the things you didn't do, but you don't regret the things you do. So, nice. and I could take a leave of absence. You have the right to take a leave of absence to take a political position. So I said, well, I have
to try it. At least.
Yeah, to try it. Yeah, I have to try it, and it was. I started when I started in the youth organization. It was around policy for school choice. So it was, and this was school, and I had kids too. So I was like, this is something that I could really feel engaged in. So I said yes. So January 2003. And it was a lot of fun, but it's also very hard. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about schools.
Yes, I'm sure.
And they are very quick to
and often negative. Right?
call. Yes. They wouldn't I had during those 12 years. I had 2 phone calls that were positive, where people said that they think that when we made a good decision.
but it is so hard because very many people get affected by choices and decisions. But very, very few actually has a full picture of this, the breadth of decisions and complexity in decisions. You are a father, and then you have your view on the world, right?
Yeah, and you have to respect that the parent who calls me and they're upset because some decision that we made is affecting their family or their kid. And that's what they see, and I can understand that, and especially if it's like a big change, like we closed down a school. That was really one of the most dramatic things we did, and I can understand that. But then, I have to be able to, even though they wouldn't accept what I told them was the motivation, I knew that this is the right decision for the greater good and for if you look at the whole municipality of kids, from all the kids and going forward. So
this is this macro, micro.
Macro. And I can. You have to, they're not stupid and they're not mean. They're just upset that there's something that they can't control. I think too. A lot of people in Sollentuna are people who are. They work in Kista, Silicon Valley, people who have good educations and are used to being able to control their lives. And then here somebody else makes a decision that affects them, and then they got really upset. So.
Mm. And then you continued in Sollentuna, I guess, municipality for some time. Were you mainly working with the school?
Yeah, all the time, actually. Yes. So all those 12 years. And so I think one of the things that when I left, was very proud of was that we decided, I went to Maine and in the US, and they had started, that was in 2010, a one-to-one program where kids in schools got their own laptops. And at that time in Sollentuna, not even teachers had their own laptops, which is that's really scary, to be honest, that was the case, but that was the case. And we saw what they could do and what the kids did, and I said, this is not it. We have to go there.
So you're interested in digitalization questions?
I was. So it was. So we went back home and decided that this is what we're going to do. In 3 years, we're going to have the infrastructure in place and all the laptops out there.
You got that done.
Yes, we did actually.
And ultimately, then hard choices, because then you need to focus your investment and budget and focus in this way, and then you needed to do less of something else. Yeah,
and then also I think it was a big transition for the teachers. Yeah. So and some of them were maybe not that happy about it, but I think when they saw some of the teachers were really enthusiastic and started working really hard with this, and they started showing their colleagues. So I think it got acceptance quite fast with the teachers, because they saw that they could do so much better with their students with all these tools that were available to them.
I'm eager to jump to the topic of ChatGPT already.
No, sorry.
Let's keep that for some time.
I have this is a really interesting project or case study, as you will say it in the business world. But from these 12 years, what did you learn, or any key things you took away from this type of leadership around change? Because here you have a very interesting, the municipality world I think is interesting, because you have a micro world with decisions and change management on a very detailed micro level of teachers. And then you have the whole fundamental macro, how can we push digitalization in schools, right? So any learnings around change in relation to digitalization and or in general from this point of your life that you could take with you?
Yes, I think the thing I learned is that we as a politician, you should sort of set the goals and point this is where we're going, and then trust the professionals to decide how.
As any kind of leader, right? I think even in a private sector, in a company, if you're a manager, you shouldn't tell them what to do. You should set the direction, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really, it took me, I think 4 years before I realized that we had all these different policies and we had all these different goals, and we had social services going into our schools and with all their programs and stuff. And I said, well, we can't, the teachers get it's just too much, coming from a top, and they can't really focus on their job. And I trust that we have really good teachers, which we did have, and still do. They still do have in Sollentuna. And I think the important thing was that we showed them that we trusted them, and we also gave them, we cut we didn't have as many people in the municipal building. We got the money out to the schools.
Administration people, or
administration people, and got more of the money out to the schools and gave the principals more autonomy. Right. So we didn't really care if they decided. We had one school where they put all their third graders, 75 of them, in one class, and then they had, 5 teachers, and they divided them up in different groups, and the parents went ballistic. And I said, well, I know we have a really good principal at this school, and I know his teachers, this was their idea to work like this. Can you please trust that they know what they're doing? And this was worked out really, really well. I think the biggest problem was that if one kid had a birthday, they couldn't invite all their classmates because there would be 75 kids. So it's and I think that, and also supporting the principal, not saying that, questioning what their decision, but trying and supporting him against the teachers. And I think that was important, to trust them. And the schools work differently, but they do a really good job, all of them. And I think that's
sounds like
a big lesson.
Example of how you should be a leader. But to have agile development and trust the people and give direction, but let them actually work autonomously.
But I hear also is that it's easy to say that, but what you did is then, okay, if I say that and I really mean it, it means I need to reduce my overheads here and put the money here. Because if I have all the overheads, I give them objectives, but they have no room to maneuver with it. So I think that's the follow through that is also important here. That if you find these principles and you believe them, what do you need to unlearn, so to speak, or what budget? What is to take the consequences?
I think you don't it's very easy if there's a debate about cell phones in schools. It's been on the table actually. So. It's very easy. It's in all the parents are talking about this. It's very easy as a politician to send out a press release. Now we're banning cell phones in schools, and we said, well, it's up to the principal to decide how they want to handle cell phones in their school. That doesn't make a very good press release. No. So that's sort of trying to focus on. We try to cheer on good achievements and make press releases about that when it happens out in the school. And when the results for the whole municipality was really good, we sent out press releases on that. And that worked. But it's a way of, and I had to, when you sit like that, you can't choose who you work with. And I don't have any authority over the people I work with either. So they could have 1,000 ideas of banning cell phones or whatever. And we had to sort of discuss, okay, how do we want to manage the schools? And that was an ongoing discussions, and I asked discussion, and I think a lot of when you get into politics as on the municipal level, you want to change things, and sometimes maybe you don't think about that you're trying to change things at the wrong level because you're up here and you're trying to micromanage.
But and now to go deeper into leadership and management on municipality level, I find this super fascinating because here is really where the money and the way we do things hit the ground between real operations, sort of think, and where we need to be politics. Yeah. If you're higher up, it's sort of there's a couple of layers in between sometimes. But here is very interesting how to have politics and leadership. So very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it takes a while to sort of figure out. And I'm amazed now that we have actually grants from the government on us. This is my government, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but they have a grant for buying school books for each that the municipalities can apply for. And I said, well, maybe we should just give them a grant for education, and they can decide what they need to make their students learn more or better. And I think it's the press release curse actually. It's you want it, and it's I've been there too, so I'm just as guilty.
So with a press release, you mean basically it should be some kind of tagline or headline that people understand and connect to. Yeah. In reality, you want to have even bigger trust, so you simply say, do what you want to do here.
I think that would be better actually, but it's very hard when you see that. Well, we have, of course, there's a lot of schools and municipalities that don't work. So I guess that's one of the reasonings behind that you actually. And I think parents want their kids to have school books, so that makes a good press release.
But at some point later, you actually got into the Swedish Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
Well, that's all parties have very long processes, and it's not a very pleasant one. And you don't want to know all not all the best. People are not at their best in those circumstances when people are fighting for a limited amount of seats, and I think that's probably the same regardless of system. But so it's. I think you have to build a lot of trust within your own party. That's the most important thing, because in Stockholm, you can't really. You need too many votes that somebody puts an X in front of your name. It's not possible in Stockholm to use that way to get into parliament. In smaller areas, constituencies, it's actually not that difficult. But in Stockholm, it's impossible. So it's your parties trust in you and where they put you on the list that makes the difference. And I think I had a long experience within the party, so I think that's one reason that I got into parliament. I was placed high enough on the list to get in.
I think it's a humble way to say it, but perhaps you actually built up the trust from
of course. That's something. And when I talk to new members of the party, and they say, "Well, we would like to be a member of parliament," I said, "That's a really good ambition." And then we start talking what's needed, and then some of them just. And I don't want to discourage anybody, because it is possible. Anybody can do it, but you have to be aware of what actually is required, because there's 349 seats and we're 10 million people. So of course it takes some work.
How was the first day in the parliament?
It was it was like starting school your first day. It was like humbling actually, because it's still humbling to go there every day and work in that environment, because it's so beautiful, and it's also it felt sort of unreal to have a seat with my name on it in there. So it was really fantastic.
And which year and who was in rule, so to speak? Which government?
Well, we lost that election. It was 2014, exactly. So it was, of course, mixed feelings. And then I got into parliament, and our prime minister and our party leader, election night, said that he was going to leave.
It was the day Reinfeldt.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it was. So that was mixed feelings after the election, but then of course when I stepping into parliament, for me personally, that was fantastic. But of course with the wrong government.
but now the circle has closed.
Yeah, so now we're in government, and then and I realized that it's a completely different job being a parliamentarian when you are in opposition and then when you're in power. I didn't have any meetings with the secretaries in my area of responsibility the way I do now. So it's completely different.
I think it's awesome that you have this kind of experience, and I think it would be great to just make more people interested in taking the career of a politician. If you were to try to sell or try to describe, what is a day like for you? And what are the potential pros and cons of being a member of the Swedish Parliament?
I think it's not a job or a career. You are voted in for 4 years, so you have to be aware that it's the only 4 years, and that's of course a con, because you don't have any job security. And it's I think somebody said it's like being self-employed in the political business. So it's a lot what you do, what you decide to do as a politician. So it's there's a lot of meetings in Parliament Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That sort of limits your flexibility. Mondays and Fridays are we can plan meetings externally. Usually we do that. So tomorrow we're actually, a few of my colleagues and me, we're going to Arlanda Airport and meeting with Swedavia, and also talking about, they're doing a big remodeling there, so we're talking about that, and also the future of the airplane, what do you call it, aviation, and what's happening, and the European Union took some new measures when it comes to actually decarbonizing flying.
Oh,
So
right.
yeah, so it's really interesting. Interesting
Is it
times.
biofuel time?
Biofuel, yeah, exactly. So it's going to be an interesting visit. So that's what we do. Like it's like I tell school kids that I meet sometimes in Parliament that it's like going to school because you learn so many new things every day, and everybody's really anxious to teach you too and talk about what's important in their field and anywhere. Like so, I try to. A lot of people can learn when they sit and read stuff. I'm more of, I want to be out there, see it, feel it, talk to people. So that's what I try to do a lot.
So I guess that's a big pro.
That's a big pro. You get to
learn a lot of things, right?
And you get to see a lot of experts and talk to really smart people, and you get access to that. So that's a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of really good camaraderie, I guess, between parliamentarians. So it's a way of life, really, and I think more for people coming from other parts of Sweden because they have to come and stay in Stockholm Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So than it is for me because I can go home.
What's the biggest frustrations though for you?
Sometimes things move too slow.
I think that happens in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, no, I think so too. It's like you can see all these things that needs to be done, and then you understand, and then you have to, everything has to be investigated. And I guess that's for the good because it's like when we do make changes, there are usually big ones, and you need to make sure that you don't do the wrong thing.
But this is a topic that we should maybe park now, but I'm very, very interested in to understand better, because I think what I have learned in the enterprise world is that if you want to make real change in a larger enterprise, you really need to understand how the system works to get real sustainable change through.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this can be very, from the outside, very hard to really understand the due process, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something also I think even if you don't have the type of experience that you have, I think you can come into Parliament maybe the fast way, but you will struggle because you don't really know the mechanisms you need to pull. So this is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. How to get policy change in place.
Yeah, and let's take that topic in relation to AI.
How to simply drive change in general.
Yeah, drive change in general. I think that's.
But let's park it for now. But
I
sure.
have it on the list here. So. Yeah. But also you moved more into, you became a spokesperson, I guess, for digitalization and infrastructure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When was that? Yeah,
that was 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, almost now. It's like I was in education, and I was also on the education committee in Parliament, and so I'd been working with education policy for 17 years. And then my party leader called and said, "Well, we think you're doing a good job. What do you feel about infrastructure?" And I said, "Yeah, well, you'll be the spokesperson and you'll be the sort of group leader in the in the committee of infrastructure." And my first thought was that he lost his mind. I don't know anything about this. And then, but of course that's a question you just don't say no to that possibility. It's more fun to be the person who sort of keeps the group together and is the spokesperson. So of course I said yes, and then just started to learn new. It was the whole the infrastructure or the digital part of that. I felt more at home. So it was more the trains, planes, and boats and cars that I needed to learn more about. Transport sector. So.
Really interesting. And we have a lot of digitalization questions here coming up. But if we start with perhaps one, and if we just take the moderate party in general, and then think specifically about digitalization, and perhaps AI if you want to, what would you say the moderate party specific view is on that if you compare it to other parties?
I think it's an issue. It's a political area that we don't discuss enough, and not very often. But I think, and that's something that I like with my party, that we're trying to move forward and be positive to innovation. And maybe even though we're sort of a conservative party, that does it not apply to these types of areas where we see innovation taking place. It's more to the fiscal side where we're more conservative when it comes to taxes and so on. So I think, and I know that our party leader and now the Prime Minister is really interested in these issues. So I think it's more positive to innovation and maybe and trying to be sort of accelerating and how we can be of a help to the business community to accelerate innovation. I think that's important.
And if you were to be rather concrete on, what really sets the Moderate Party aside from other or parties in these matters. Can you give some examples, perhaps?
I think it's hard to be any. It's more of a feeling of how maybe other parties don't prioritize these issues as much. I think the Center Party has some people who are really interested in these issues, and it's more on a personal level in other parties, I think, and then part of our DNA to promote innovation. Yeah.
Okay, so you're more pro-innovation, you would say, and have a more general, what would you say, positive view on that we need more digitalization?
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, definitely more, and take advantage of all the new innovations that are coming to sort of make Sweden a better country, I think, and then maybe be a leader in the rest of the world as well, to show that we can. I think it's crucial for us if we want to sort of continue to grow as a country and keep all the benefits that we have as a people here in Sweden.
That sounds great. So if digital and technical nerds like me and Henrik here want to know the pros and cons of voting for the Moderate Party, we should feel comfortable that that party will be.
I think so, definitely, and of course there's going to be. You probably won't love all the policy that come out in this area, but I think the being positive to innovation and trying to make it happen in Sweden and talk about it as something that we're good at and should be best in the world at, and I think that's important.
If I ask a rather difficult question about steel manning, have you heard about the straw man versus steel man kind of? So straw man, that basically means when you speak badly about something else, some other party or some other person, and steel manning is when you really try to speak well about perhaps even a competitor of yours. If you were to steel man some other party and say they are really good at digitalization, could you find another party that you would like to steel man in that way and say, I think they actually are really good? You mentioned Center Party.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and they're part of the opposition now. So yes, definitely. I think they are also on the more positive to innovation and maybe more positive to change than others. So definitely. But there are, I think, in the Social Democrats, I've met people, and in the Liberal Party, definitely people who are interested and driving these agendas within their parties. So there are I think but the level of importance within the parties is more based on how many people they have that are interested in these issues.
Yes, that's an interesting topic, right? So one of the key things, if you want to move forward on anything, but let's now take data, AI, digitalization, is it will boil down to individuals as well who really pushes the agenda and has this know-how to communicate and discuss it. And this is what you highlight, that maybe Moderaterna, the Moderate Party, has more of an agenda here as a party, whereas there has been some individuals with excellent know-how in relation to politics in this. But both things are, I guess, really relevant to move forward.
Yeah, I think so. And also what we're trying to do now, and that I've actually sort of made it a mission on my own, is and with some of my colleagues, to try and put forward some kind of policy agenda for us internally as a party to talk about AI, and also trying to get people excited internally about the possibilities. And I think that's, especially if you look at when you meet politicians on a municipal level, for example, I think that's important. So I still have, so that's.
But I fully I really think that's good. But why is it important, if you want to elaborate, that we have a common policy or view on these things? Why is that important?
Well, I think we don't have to, the house, like what should be done and what kind of innovation, I think that's not where we're supposed to be, but we have to sort of set a framework and so that people can feel safe, that and still not make it difficult to innovate. So that's really difficult one, but when it comes to data and people's integrity, I still think that we need to have some kind of policy in place so that people can feel trust the new technologies that are coming out, and also people need to learn more about how they work and to feel safe. And when I think a lot of people are using AI today, even though they don't know that they actually are. But I think we need to sort of raise the level of awareness and also get some policy in place. And I don't have all the answers because we're still sort of looking at what this policy should look like. And of course, the European Union is going to guide or set limits to what we can do as well. But I think right now the way the debate is going, I think people are a little bit scared or very scared, and we need to sort of get people to trust this development that's actually happening, and that's the good is actually more is that side
more
is more positive than negative, and we can handle the negative. And
but if I extrapolate on what
yes.
you said now, and used to test, because I think what you're saying is super important. It is like in a political debate or discussion, sometimes the bigger picture gets obscured by many small point arguments on certain things. So as a political party or as a society, someone needs to, do we believe we will fundamentally have it better with technology or worse? Okay, we want to have it because we think it's really going to save millions of lives ultimately, and it's going to fix, this is how we fix really, really big problems. Okay, so that's our main statement. Now we need to do it in a safe way, because sometimes it's a little bit like we get so bogged up in the little nitty-gritty things. So what, you don't want progress? You want me to stick my, so this is for me what I think is really important to have an internal debate. Are we tech phobic, or are we tech pro? What is essentially ideologically, is this a goal and now we need to solve it safe, or should we just ban it? And I think in the political debate, sometimes this gets lost.
Yes.
Because different agendas is then driving different topics. So this is what I hear, why it's super important to have this conversation, and then together as a party, what do we stand for? Are we actually stand for this? We need this to solve things, but of course we should do it safe. But it's not like a no first. So we always say, don't ask a security guy if you can do it. He will say no. You should ask, or a lawyer. You ask him, how should I do it safe?
Yeah.
It's
important.
If we move to a question more about the current state, perhaps, of digitalization in Sweden, and also AI, I can give a quick view that I have, and it would be fun to hear what you agree with or disagree with. But I would argue that Sweden actually has a rather good position when it comes to digitalization in general, and has had that for a rather long time. I would not argue that's the case for AI, though, and we are a bit behind even some Nordic countries and European countries, and certainly from China and US. What is your view of the current state of, for one, digitalization, but secondly, AI in Sweden?
I think we are a very digital people in general. So it's and then we have, but we still have. So I think that picture is correct. But it's partly there's a problem with the public sector where they are very much behind. And if you look at international rankings, we really have a big issue there. And I think we had the Transportstyrelsen scandal, and I think it's still sort of makes public offices and government institutions more careful, or maybe they're so afraid of doing things wrong. So the public sector still has a lot of things to do, even on sort of a basic digitalization level. When it comes to AI, I think it feels like we are, I don't know, woke up too late, got a little bit sort of what's happening around us, and now suddenly I think we have all we could probably be leading in the world if we wanted to, if we like started to work on it, but we're still way behind, and we still get the debate like we did with ChatGPT. How are we going to stop our students from using this? So
that would be an awesome topic to speak more about, since you have an expertise and interest in school as well. But if we just continue, I mean, Finland, for example, I think they already in 2017 they had like a national AI strategy with a budget connected to it. There was a big thing in April in 2018 where both the EU Commission came out with a big report how they're going to invest like billions of euros into it. France, Germany, UK, all of them also in April 2018 did the same, but not so much in Sweden. We have like AI guidelines, but not really a strategy with budget.
There's a little bit. There's the AI center in Gothenburg, and there's AI Sweden, and there's a few, and then you have the Wallenberg, the WASP, but that's not. They're on their own. That's completely private. But there's been some initiatives, but it feels like we don't have. We have the goal when it comes to digitalization that we should be the best in the world to use the possibilities, and I think that's lame. We should lead the development, but we don't really have we haven't set a goal when it comes to AI.
No.
And I think that's something that's we need to do.
Please help us drive that.
That's the report I'm working on is that's what
what
include.
report are you working on?
It's an internal report on AI and trying to put down an agenda for what we would like to see on the policy side.
Awesome.
And this is so interesting to understand. I mean, like, I'm not sure if we should take these topics now, but starting from that statement and your standpoint here, that is fantastic for us to hear. How do you go about going from we are here and maybe we woke up late, now I'm here, I want to do a change here. What are the due process? What happens now? You need to write the report, or what is the tactical, with your experience, what do you do to get the right change happening?
Well, I think I need to sort of, we need to get acceptance. There's a lot of like hierarchy within a party. So you need to sort of, okay, we might write a report. We pitch it to the leadership in the party and we see what do they think. And it's usually the things that don't involve money is always easier. Like the finance guy, it must be very, I don't know. They're very, very important, but they have to say no to so many good things, and because they have to prioritize. But you have to, if it's finances, you have to get it through there, and then the other policy things is then we're 4 parties that's working together. So you need to start selling those things to the other parties.
So you're building a critical mass and momentum around what's the problem, what's the compelling event, what's the urgency, and what do we think are the ways to invest. Is that a summary of sort of what you... Yeah. And how are you going with your report?
Too slow now. But I think it's when I talk to Erik Slottner and his staff, they are like he has a lot on his plate, and they have the EU chairmanship this semester as well. But my feeling is that he has a sense of urgency as well. It's just a matter of how do we do the right things so we make sure that our people's integrity is secure and that we still can drive innovation. And that's it. And then of course it's going to be a discussion about if there's money involved, which I think there probably will be, and then we have the discussion with finance as well. But I think I think that's a good start. If I was talking to him and he was completely uninterested and didn't see the point. He's hosting the big event in Gothenburg next week, and I'm really looking forward to that. So that's a good thing that they are hosting that, and that's in Sweden.
Can we stay a little bit on this, because I think if we understand due process, the report and how this is conceived is really a critical starting point in all this. And I have a question. Who do you seek advice from, and what angles do you typically want to do, concretely with this report?
But I think the important thing is one thing is to sort of paint a picture of what's in it for us, like what's actually possible. And which big problems could probably be addressed using AI. So it's also to get this. I think that's important so that people can understand what we're actually talking about. Because right now they're only talking about it's scary to share your data, and they don't say okay, but if you share your data, you actually get possibility of all this.
So then you want input on what does Dig's
Yes.
report say, and
Yeah.
what other data can we say that this is the potential, or this is what this is what the game is really all about.
And I think it's when I've talked to a lot of people during, like, we're working with this report, trying to find input everywhere, and I say what you need to, when we have the seminars in Parliament, for example, it's important that you paint this picture, that you can actually talk about this company has developed this application, and it can actually solve this. And I was at a Google event at the beginning of this week, and they were saying that they could, by using an AI in one of their data centers, they had reduced the energy, the need for energy by 30%. And that's a powerful statement, especially if you look at our power system in Sweden. And I think we need those very concrete examples of what is already being done.
Yes.
And the 140 billion that DIG has sort of estimated that the public sector could actually the efficiency potential with the AI solutions that are already on the market. That's what they did, the calculation they did. If I was still in the municipality, I would like, yay! I think I want a part of that. How do we do that?
And that's just on the economy side. I mean, that you can actually save money by using
Yeah.
AI. But I think you should also think about what the quality improvements could be if you take health sector.
Yeah, you can
for
save
example.
lives.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really. I actually signed up for that. Isn't it Spotify's Daniel Ek, his new company?
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a waiting list because I said, well, I can share
sign up as well. Yes.
Yes, I can share my health data. Be my guest, because I guess in the end that could probably help me and maybe somebody else.
So one part of the report is to really paint the picture of what could happen. What are the other key critical sections in such a report?
But I think also to quantify what kind of investment would be needed on a national level. That's also, of course, the finance people needs to, like what needs to be done. Like what do we need? And I think that's, compared to a lot of other things, the price tag is not going to be enormous. It's more getting experts in and maybe have some more research money and that.
But this is super interesting. I think that works on these topics on a daily basis, but in a company like Scania or Vattenfall, what should you invest in? So how do you paint the problem of how do you paint any picture of where the problem lies, and do you paint any picture of how this investment needs to, what is the investment all about? Is it just infrastructure? Is it change? Do you need to paint that picture?
Yeah, I think we do need to be more concrete when it comes to that. And then also, are there any policy that needs to be changed? So to support and also changed so that we don't make it more difficult to innovate. So I think that's both. Is there anything existing policy that needs to be changed because it could actually be something that's would be difficult to get around if you're trying to innovate, and the other one is what kind of support is needed in the policy.
I'm working on a report like that right now, but in the company world it will be called a data strategy, and then with a clear investment plan around this. And then of course I'm just comparing with enterprise. Then you need to understand, how do I do it? Very technical storytelling so it makes sense. How do I do the business case, all that. But one of the hardest things to convey, I think, we can talk about how to convey this, you can help me. We need to have reorganizational change. We need to have incentive change. We need to have mandate changes, because some of the problems has nothing to do with the investment. It has more about, as you talked about before, how we have organized the discussion. This is a general technology. It goes across. So how do you explain and discuss those structural changes? That is investment, but not really investment, but it's more change and painful.
Yeah, I know.
You see what I mean, right?
Yeah, I see. But I think it's we haven't really we haven't discussed that, but that's really interesting to take into the report, I think, as well. Yeah, it has to be in there, because it's going to, and a lot of people feel so threatened, and that's why maybe you have to be very clear about what kind of changes are going to be needed.
We can talk about this on the AI after work, but I used this at an award ceremony. I had a 10-minute fire, said AI is not a tech problem. AI is an organizational problem. And how do we infuse AI in the core DNA rather than doing AI sugarcoating on the old analog ways?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the problem, right?
So then you have to. You're not just. You need. It's a whole. Like you have to. You're going to change an whole organization. So that's going. It's really, really big. And if you start to think about like the public sector, that's huge organization.
So in my report right now, I need to go 360 degrees around the investment. What's the operating model change? What is the technology change? What is the process change? What is the people change?
Yeah,
interesting to do that exercise on a macro level.
Yes, yeah, and then it's now I feel like
let's talk.
No, it can be done. I'm coming, and I think if you get people to see that they actually can do their job better and deliver more, if they get support by some kind of AI application, I think that's going to be helpful.
Perhaps we need to use AI to solve this.
Have you tried to ask the ChatGPT yet for your report?
No, I haven't. I need more. I think I'm more at advanced level for. But I have to tell a funny story. I'm actually chair of our local housing company. You know, our municipalities have houses. So I'm chair of our board, and I need to sort of try and use this AI ideas on a smaller scale. So I was talking to my colleague on the board, and he's from the same party, and we said I want to give the company like a task to look at what data do we have, what applications are there for managing houses, and he said, well, I can look into that. He works at an IT department, so he started looking, and then it took maybe an hour, and then what do you think about this? And he came back it was like, wow. And then I asked him, that was really fantastic. Well, he had used an AI to write it, and he said he had some kind of advanced licensed application, so he could and I said I need to have that, and will make my life easy.
I also cheated like that recently,
but it's not cheating, it's just
it's not,
no,
but you shouldn't claim it's you that written it, but I actually did it for, it's like värdegrundar, like the proper values that you should have in an organization, and we had a big workshop on that, and then we tried to come up with a good set of keywords or ideas about it. And I just wrote to ChatGPT 4, then this license thing, asking if you were to summarize how we should have the proper values in public sector that includes the following keywords. And I just pasted in the keywords like in a mess of different words. And it came out with this super beautiful summarization with a set of 8 bullet points and an intro and a perfect ending. Jesus Christ.
But I think we were actually discussing that within the party, and I said we like to write articles and stuff like that. And then somebody said, well, their teachers are now they can ask ChatGPT if ChatGPT has written something to see if kids have cheated, and what if journalists would do that with our articles. Is that a Let's
move to that topic.
Is that a problem?
Let's move to that. So if we take that specific topic, since you have an interest in schools and AI and digitalization, and I think you wrote a long article about digitalization in schools recently as well.
That was that's my private opinion about it. Okay. So it's not the parties. So just to make that clear.
In any case,
yes.
I think the schools could benefit from digitalization, and then of course AI as well. So if we just jump directly, we can move to the general digitalization later. But if we just move to ChatGPT, and I can give a small anecdote myself first, and I hope she's not listening now. But my partner's daughter used ChatGPT to, take advantage, not cheat, in some kind of exam, and then I later sent her a link to the first case where they actually were sentenced for cheating in a Swedish university using ChatGPT, and they got sanctioned for that. And she replied to me saying, "Oh, they were so stupid. They don't know how to use this ChatGPT properly. When I use it, I just ask a question, I get some reply, then I change the words, and I include my own thoughts, but I just use it as inspiration, and then I submit it." And she said, that person that got caught doing it, they'd simply, use the answer, and that was so stupid of them. But then, if you think, either you can say that this is advanced cheating, or you can say this is the future of education as well. What do you think?
I think the later. I think it's the future of education, but I am not sure everybody agrees with me. I think I think the difficult thing, I think, is that you still need to be able to look at the thing you get from ChatGPT and see, is this reasonable? Because you can not everything is not right. It's going to be get better, but still.
It's a lot of hallucinations and false facts.
Exactly. So you need to give kids the sort of framework and the knowledge to see through that and to do what your partner's daughter did. And I think that's, and I don't know exactly how do you do that and what exactly is that. So that's going to be something that we probably need to determine in that case. What do you need to, do you need to learn all the different kings in Sweden and when they were in reign? That's, some people think we should know that, but I don't know.
Isn't it similar to how you had to learn how to multiply large numbers before, but today you use a calculator?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a big change for how you look on education. But I think you need to give kids a good framework, and then within that framework, and when they have that framework, just to give them tools to use. And ChatGPT is a really good tool to use. And I think the way your partner's daughter used it, I think that's the future, because that's the way their work life is going to look when they come. Right, they need to be real savvy at using this as a tool to be more productive, and that's what everybody's going to expect. And
but because if we just looked at the macro perspective, that the productivity frontier is moving really fast forward now, and the knowledge and information frontier as well. And so in that case, what we learn in school, or what the normal kid knows just by Googling in internet is very different to 30 years ago. So you could argue that now we need to then, so the productivity frontier has gone up, so we are expecting the kids to use ChatGPT to do the first drafts, and now we need to tweak the questions.
Yes.
So we can basically it's not about writing the essay in 10 pages. It's about critiquing your own essay, or you can move the frontier of sophistication, because you have a toolbox now. You have a calculator, so I can ask you really complicated questions because you have a calculator to solve it. I think if you think carefully now, you need to level up your game on education, because this part we learn in this way, or we get these tools. What then is the productivity frontier in education and knowledge? Do you see what I mean? Everything changed. Yeah. So we need to go backwards. Feels really strange.
Yeah, but everybody's talking about books and the importance of books and pace. I don't know if I still read some of those articles and debates that people haven't read, and then everybody's talking about that it's important to learn to write with a pen and paper, and kids should not be in front of screens, and there's been a lot of debate about that. So I feel that we're more like the debate is moving more backwards than forwards. And
but if I'm humble, I would not even box those two questions in the same problem, because I can relate to, there is a beauty in reading ability. Yeah. And it's a beauty in how that. Okay, so this might be that we shouldn't let go of that, but that to me is a different thing if you have good handwriting compared, I don't know. I think it's not that simple. But
that's the way the debate is. It's either or. It's not both. And that's
this is the problem.
I think, and that's what we like in Sollentuna when we did starting with the 1-to-1 and. Everybody got angry and thought that we were destroying the schools and the kids, and so it was really a tough time, partly because of the debate and having to sort of, we are neighbors to Swedish Silicon Valley, and everybody's using computers, and then you have the school as a computer-free zone. It doesn't make any sense. And then if you look, if I was in a classroom where you had kids with just come to Sweden and didn't speak Swedish, and the teachers there said that they had to sort of change their whole planning because the kids were learning too fast. Because they could use Google Translate and they could understand and keep up. They didn't have to start with like the really basic reading in Swedish. Of course, they had to learn Swedish, but they could do it simultaneously while they were working on the level that was equivalent to where their age. So when you have seen all that and what you actually can do, I have a hard time with people questioning the existence of computers or iPads in schools, but and it's still important that and if you look at a school and good teacher, they will use both. They will use pen and paper. They will have kids paint. They will have kids read books.
But why is it so bipolar? All these different arguments. I mean, like, because I see this over and over again in many things.
Yeah.
There where this is a multifaceted problem, of course,
Yeah.
and there is both. There's reasons for both, and they should be able to coexist. But we like to make it black or white, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that's if you look at the political debate, it has to be like you have 140 or maybe 240 signs on Twitter, and you have and everything moves really fast, and also it has to be one-liners and easy to communicate. So, and I think sometimes that's not. And if you look at AI, like. It's a crazy to discuss black and white, and it's so complex, and you need to be able to have in-depth discussions. So it's really not suitable for the political debate because it's black and white and gets too simplified, I think.
I find one of the main problems, especially with a topic like AI. It's when you oversimplify it to a level where it makes no sense anymore. How do you tackle that, by the way?
I don't know. I think people's attention span and I don't know. It's.
But we are part of the problem. We are feeding the media. Everything is feeding into this goldfish attention span.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think also it's for me as a politician. I take part in those discussions as well, and then. But then I have to step back and say there are other issues also that we need to have other discussions than those that we do in media and on Twitter or on Facebook. We have to have more serious discussions about real hard issues and that's and more complex topics. So, but that discussion is of course going on as well. But when it comes to education, I think it's very black and white on all different levels right now. So it's really. I think it's sad to see when you see all the things that could be done and the way ChatGPT, for example, could be used to really like level up education and make it get kids take one step further. And we're talking about how to stop it instead of how to use it, which is it's easy.
It's the wrong debate. We're having the wrong debate. That's what you are.
A little bit. We're having the wrong, and I think people are scared. Like teachers are scared. What's going to do? What's going to be asked of me to do? What kind of work? Like what kind of exams do I need to give the kids? And how? So I think it's a lot of fear.
I worked as a teacher myself in university for 20 years ago or something, 15 perhaps. And I remember, the level of effort you have to put in to just write an exam, to do the exam itself. And it's a lot of work. And I would love, if I were to be a teacher today, I would use AI all the time to write the exams and have new ideas all the time about the proper questions. It's like the awesome tool you can think of. Mm-hmm. And I think, I very much agree with what you said, that teachers today are really afraid of it. But I think if they rethink a bit about how they work themselves. But it is a bit hard, right? I mean, still you have to formulate an exam if you take the exam part. I think exam is just a small part of education, of course. I mean, just using it in the normal teaching in how does physics work or whatnot, and having AI as part of that learning process, that would be the biggest improvement, I think. But the exams as well could, of course, that needs to change rather drastically.
But let me test something on you and see how you see this, because I'm working right now on the opening keynote for Data Innovation Summit here in May, and we're gonna talk about innovation and try to basically
Are you using ChatGPT?
No, not at all.
Yes, I
yet.
think you are.
Not yet, not yet. But we are basically trying to sort out a very simple statement that you can follow in research, and you can actually prove it quite easily. That for something to be called innovation, it has to have uptake and adoption. It has to be used. Before that is an invention. It can be a crazy, funny invention, but innovation is something that you can sort of see as an after a while. Yes, this was useful, and it had a major uptake in society. And then you can look at that problem, that everything we are talking about in the simplest form when we say innovation is that doing new things or doing old things in new ways. So like we are forced as individuals, as teams, as organizations, as society, as a department to rethink how we do things in different ways. And with that kind of hardcore topic, that's the essence of the problem here, that you can do new things with AI now. It's there as electricity. What can we do about it? And the problem we have now is ultimately the hard thing of reinventing. We talk about Elon Musk and first principles, going back to the core of what is it that we are doing and rethinking how that is done. Isn't this back and forth on all levels now, from the school to the party to how we should invest as a society, as a company? How do we innovate? And how do we not do this on the side but bring it into normal life?
Let's close the topic. I think first. Before what was the question basically? How do we innovate?
So I'm wanting to test. Aren't we talking now ultimately on all different levels on how do we become better at innovating as individuals?
Yeah. Could we have that as a separate topic though? Because we still were in the school topic before we move to the next one.
Okay, I was moving out of the topic I thought was.
Yes. But okay, I think you will agree that AI of course will change how education is happening right now, and usually that's a hurtful experience when disruption happens, and then the question is, how should we, what would be your thing? Can you as a politician think, what can we do to help this transition, if we call it that? I'm not sure if that's the right word, but some kind of big change will potentially happen in education. If it means to have personalized, education could be one thing. Just as in medicine, you can now have like precision medicine or personalized medicine, as you have personalized music or movies or whatnot. How can we help, the educational system in Sweden take advantage of this in a good way, and perhaps lead, as you said, and not just make use of it?
But I think the way, if you get, there are a lot of really, really great teachers and who innovate the way they teach kids all the time. And I saw it so many times. That's one of those were my favorite days. Like when I could spend a whole day with a teacher in a classroom and see how they were doing things. And I think they do that all the time. And then if you give them access to the tools and maybe a little bit of training and a little bit of maybe just some ideas of how examples of how this can be used, I think you can get some really great teachers. Even they will be even better, and they I think it spreads around the teacher community and they start looking at each other. What are you doing? And they will start. There's a lot of communities online in different areas where they share, and so I think it's giving them access to the tools and maybe some inspiration, and get these ambassadors, these teachers on boards, and they will start. I think it can. I think that's probably the easiest way, because if politicians say something that you should do this in schools, that usually doesn't work very well.
I think you answered that so beautifully. It's actually, Eric also says, I get goosebumps.
Goosebump moment.
But it actually connects to what you said about innovation
it's the same,
as well.
You actually answered my question equally as you asked her question.
Now, but I think, just to rephrase what you said, I think, by simply giving access and upskilling the existing teachers and then letting them innovate, to find different ways to do this, and then have them coming up with the best solution. It's so beautiful, I think.
Yeah, and I think, and they also, and get, then also when you see that, and I think you also have to, when you see that teachers are doing that should be like they should get some kind of reward for that as well. In incentivized, exactly. And I think that could probably be the same with, like, if you look at nurses and doctors and people working with healthcare, if they like get access and get like inspired, and they can see that, well, if we can use it this way, this could help our patients. Or like I have a son who works taking care of elder people in their homes. If he could say that, well, get inspired and say maybe, well, if we have this, we know this about all the old people that we were visiting, and how can we use what we know and maybe make our care of them better? I think that would, because that's what, like, if they have a drive to do their job good,
but
better.
You actually formulated, in my opinion, one of the most important sections in your report, and and I would use a very, very similar rhetoric in the professional life, and this is, we call it how do we enable micro innovation. So what you essentially do when you go back to school and you understand this environment, this domain really well, you realize that you need to have domain expertise in order to understand how to use data and AI. This is fundamental that we understand, whatever you do. So then it means you need to put policy, you need to put the resources in the hands of the people who are passionate and know their stuff. And now, essentially, that's the solution to the real question: how do we get ahead in AI? Yeah. Number one is, like, what are the mechanisms and policies that allows people with the domain expertise to reinvent what they need to do when they better understand, when there is not, it's like a Venn diagram. This is my domain, school. This is data and AI. The new school system will live in the intersect. So how do I make that happen everywhere in society? I think you answered the question.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's really, I didn't think, yeah, but, you're right.
And I have research that shows that this is a fractal problem. It means it's a pattern how you need to think about these things, that you can take on one individual, that you can take on a team level, on an organization, and then basically the macro solution is an intense amount of micro solutions. The macro problem cannot be solved with a macro big stroke, is to make the patterns happen, what you said now, at scale. This is my opinion.
Yeah, but it's I agree.
There's no magic wand here.
No, there's not, and it's probably going to be a lot of hard work, and people are going to change and have to change the way they work and stuff. But I think you're right. I think it's when regardless of what you do, if you with the AI at your disposal, and you can see that you can do your job better, or like, for example, you don't have to have as many trains derailing because you have an AI system that can make. You had a good word, planning the maintenance.
Data-driven maintenance.
Data-driven maintenance, and that can actually reduce the number of trains that are stuck, or people who get stuck on trains by, I don't know how many percent.
So how do you put the society on steroids, where the people who knows what they're doing in their domain has access to new know-how and can reinvent? I mean, like, the problem is you don't know what you don't know. So you need to be exposed to it, you need to be trained, but then something happens when you realize, oh, I can do my essays faster now. But you need to have the problem right first. Yeah. But how can you put that on a macro level scale? I think that's what is stopping us, because we are not coming up with the innovative idea. No. And it can't be Americans or a vendor or a management consultant selling it. It needs to be coming from within, as you said. Let them be. Now, how do you fuel these teachers? How do you fuel the nurses so they can then innovate? I think this is really hard question. But it's really the real question, I think.
But I think if you look at it, go back to my board in Sollentuna, it's now we're actually giving sort of a task to the company to look at what data sources do we have within the company. And also because like every company, we need to try and do things more efficiently, and probably like maybe deliver better, or also try and deliver better service to our tenants, and also because our houses are in like exposed areas where there's a social issue problems. How can we use this to make the environment safer for the tenants where they live, and look at all the data and see, because there are like applications out there on the market. So that's also part inventing what's already out there. What can we use? And I think that's asking those questions. I don't have the expertise. I'm not good at taking care of housing buildings. That's not my expertise. But I know that they are really good experts on this. And they know, like, if they can start thinking in the term, what information, what data do we have about our houses? What information do we have about our tenants? And then it starts getting sensitive, because you have integrity and GDPR and stuff. But of course, they have to take that into account. And what we want to see is some kind of plan, and what like in what areas do they see possibility, and what do they see that could be done, and what's already out there, and where do they want to go? So I think by asking those questions, when you don't have the expertise yourself, I think if people start thinking in their area of expertise, and if you ask questions about what data do you have, and we're thinking that we'll give them maybe a year to look at this task, because it's going to take a while. And I think I hope that it's going to start interest within the company, and I know that they are very we've said that we want our tenants to be more happy, happy where they with us as their landlords, and I know that that's what they want to do as well. They have a lot of the really good people who want to do good things, and.
I mean, also, I think you said so many good things here. For one, it's about giving access and letting people, by upskilling them, make their own decisions and start to innovate. And that can be for the schools and the teachers and the students, and for the housing organization or association that you're working with. But what about politicians? How can we give access and upskill politicians about AI so they can invent themselves the proper way to do this?
That's really hard. What data do we have? We have a lot of, I guess, if you look at, that's a really sensitive one when it comes to working with your constituency and what data you have access to, and then you have your GDPR and all those. So that's not, but reinventing us as politicians, I think that's, I think
it's more, the question is rather not really how to make you more efficient. I guess that's also interesting, but I was thinking more to make sure that you as politicians, I mean, you already are interested in AI and digitalization, but there's a lot of other politicians and a lot of other departments and silos, as you mentioned, that perhaps is not, and they don't see the potential of using data and AI properly. But yes, do you want to have
one more of those?
Perfect. So that's more than my question. If you see that, I think you phrase it so aptly. I mean, to say that we simply give them access, we upskill them about the possibilities and how it really works, and then we let them invent. And I think the same, shouldn't that apply for politicians, so they can invent how to use data and AI properly in whatever areas of responsibility that they do have, if it is transport, healthcare, education, or whatever.
So Anders was simply flipping what you said on how we should solve it in schools back on the political arena.
But I
think it's correct, Anders, by the way.
Yeah, but I think it's if that's what I said when we have those seminars in Parliament and inviting all the parliamentarians to come and hear. And I was talking to, we have had a few actually, and I've said that you need to be made to show solutions and what has been done by AI. Right. So because if we can see that there's benefits for society, whichever area, like I said, if you have data-driven maintenance of railroads so people don't have to get stuck on the trains all the time, that's a very powerful message if we could. And I know there's quite a few in the Committee on Infrastructure that are interested in this, and that's. So I think showing the possibilities and because right now I think for many people AI is very abstract and it's scary. They
so
I
to
think
make it more concrete.
Yes, I think so too. I think that's the way to get more politicians on board. I think to show the possibilities that AI actually brings.
And it starts like you need to start getting exposed to it, and not only the fluffy stuff. We can start there, but at some point we need to also, as we talk about it all the time, that you said it before, we cannot only have the black and white in Twitter level. We need to take the harder topics, harder issues. This is one of those. You need to actually invest some more time than goldfish time in order to better understand the concepts.
Yeah.
Or you need to recruit people who really knows the concepts working in the right places. So I think this bridging the knowledge gap, or sort of, there is a distance now between domain knowledge and tech knowledge in all over society, right? And this is, how do you bridge that? How do we take away that distance so we can have a joint conversation? Now it's a little bit like, I usually say, if you want to do AI in medicine, one guy speaks Latin and the other guy speaks in a coding language, Python. They cannot communicate, right? No. So, I mean, so this gap, I think we're coming back to that. This is a divide between people who are in the know and the people who are in the know of their domain.
Yeah, and how do we, it's, but I there's been examples of good solutions within healthcare. So of course there are. How did those work then? Because then they must have talked to each other. The guy speak Latin, the guy speak Python.
The solution is super simple and super clear in micro context. It's super clear, and I have all the proof of all the failures I have done and all the successes. It's like, in the end, it only works when you get a cross-disciplinary team together where the domain expertise is working closely with the technology and data expertise, and you build something like a product around this, or engineering something together. The engineers that doesn't know the domain problem cannot invent the problem, and the business people or healthcare people who doesn't know what can be done cannot solve it. So it's a cross-disciplinary thing at its core that needs to be solved. And then if you take this, when they solve it in healthcare, it's because they created a team or a project where they, with the head researcher, worked with the head surgeon, worked with technicians close in their team. It wasn't like we were over here and they were flipping the problem over there. They have had a very intense collaboration. Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, that's how you learn, by doing, working together. And then they don't understand each other in the beginning, but then by working intensely over time, they do. It's that simple or hard?
It sounds very simple, but I think it's probably very hard.
As a mechanism, it's simple, but it doesn't go. We are not organized like that. We are organized
in silos.
I guess it's breaking the silos, is what you're saying, and I guess that applies to politicians as well.
But then I don't know. It's also, I think a problem in a lot of organizations is that you treat AI as a tech issue, and you give all those.
It's not.
No, exactly. It's far from it. But
it's a tech issue, but it's
not sufficient with the tech skills. You need to have.
No. You have to have exactly. Yes. You have to have the guy speaking Latin as well, not just the tech guys who speaks Python. Yeah.
And if you want to go deep, now we're going deep, right? So if you talk about ideologies of how you organize stuff, you can either have an ideology which is division of labor. So typically when you have something that is quite mature and you want to scale that up, you put people in boxes with the same discipline competence and you divide it up like this. And then you can have another ideology of, another objective when you organize that is called separation of concerns. So my concern is school, but it's end-to-end technology like this. So basically it's a little bit like, do I slice the teams in this way or do I group them in another way? And essentially, our whole society is in division of labor. And that's the wrong organizational structure for what we are talking about in AI. That's the
technology in general.
For technology in general, I would argue.
Yeah. I mean, awesome. And we mentioned a number of different areas now, in this industrial sectors like education or healthcare or transport or whatnot. Do you have any, if we speak AI or digitalization in general, Where do you see perhaps the biggest potential and need for digitalization and AI in different sectors? Do you have schooling is one, of course. Is there some others one that you feel extra important?
But I think, like, if you look at the bigger challenges that we have is like maintaining our level of welfare. I don't know,
welfare.
Yeah. Welfare, and affording that in the future. That's really a big issue. Like in general, making sure that we can afford it without like having 100% tax, because I don't think anybody would like that. And then you have climate change. That's also a really, really big problem. And I think, like, if you look at only the small example of Google's data center, power consumption. There's and how people travel, and there's a lot of things that we could accelerate our fight against climate change with using AI. So I think that if you look at the bigger challenges that we as a society have, and I think also, I don't know how we should, like, all this where actually people say, well, isn't this another tool for all these like bad like the misinformation that's around and the polarization that we see? Is it possible to use AI to counter that, maybe? Because that would be really fantastic, because there are some, I think it's all those the bigger issues that we talk about, that if we could that actually where AI could help solve a lot of it.
Awesome. I like that you focused more on the biggest, like, societal kind of challenges that we do have, like climate change, or even education, I would argue, or all the problems that we're seeing. But then if we flip the question here and then perhaps ask, what are the biggest fears? What are the biggest misuses and abuses of AI? You mentioned a number of them, but I think, unfortunately, in media, this gets so much attention, all the potential abuses of AI. But what's your idea? What do you fear the most that AI or digitalization could be abused for?
I think like the system that they have in China, where they like it sounds like 1980 social scoring. That's really horrible. And also, I was watching we were watching a TV series called Madam Secretary, and they had weapons that were AI.
Autonomous weapons.
Yeah, autonomous weapons. That's I hadn't thought about that until I saw it, and it's kind of fictional, but I guess it's probably not fictional if you start thinking about it. And that's really scary if we have autonomous weapons. So that's something that scares me. I'm not that scared about like health data getting into, like, that's something that people are really scared about. So I think that could be used for so many good things if we could be better at sharing that data, but we need to, of course, make it anonymous in some cases. But still, there's where a lot of people's fears are. And I think, but as you said, the media is always, but that's the media logic. They always focus on the problems and the bad things. Yeah. And I talked to a journalist once. I said, "Why can't you ever write something positive?" I was like, that was when I was in the municipality. I was so tired of the journalist, and he said, "Well, people are not interested in reading good news."
It's so horrible that he said that.
Yeah, that was
our society.
That's years ago, and it sticks with me because that's really, and then. Because there are
no drama,
No, but they could, like, if people get saved from breast cancer, I think that's fantastic. They have written about that, but when they were able to look at the screens from the mammograms and detect breast cancer earlier, so that's really. And then if they could look at more at all these, like, more personalized medical treatments and precision medicine. That's really, really fantastic. And then I think it would be interesting to hear about, I heard that Singapore is changing their whole education system to AI-based personalized learning, and that would be interesting.
It's so cool. And they are, and Singapore is a very interesting, I don't know, I've followed a little bit, but can you tell us more about that particular one?
No, I've just, somebody told me that they were doing that. I haven't, since I don't work with education issues anymore, so I haven't really tried to find out more, but I think it sounded like something they would do, and it would be interesting to see where that would sort of be game changer.
Can I come with a topic that is sort of not related, but I think is one of the major challenges in order to succeed with data and AI, and the ones when we see great results being presented, we don't really know the back end stories that I want to share. So I think both me and Anders can conclude and can convey that in order to succeed with any AI, it starts with experimentation. So, and we talk about fail fast. Daniel Ek at Spotify, how did we're
going to be the company that fails the fastest, and that sounds really bad, but actually it's really, if you understand what he meant, it's actually a really rather good thing, so, a very good thing.
Because when we are in this transition from old way of doing things to new way of doing things, you need to experiment, and so of course then it's going to be risk, and you need to containerize risk. A major problem that has evolved in society, in technology, and also in big companies, is that there was experimentation going on. We put people to the moon, and somewhere 60s, 70s, 80s, we were not allowed to fail anymore, and we built very robust business cases, and we got project management in, and we kind of lost our way to actually what we did much, much, much better in terms of testing, experimenting, and then continuing what worked. And the essence of data and AI is that it's an iterative process. And here now we have a major problem in policy and incentives and culture in companies, and especially in public sector, where you cannot deal with experimentation so easily. So I think this is actually...
What's the question then?
How do we deal with experimentation, and what is the political or policy or things that needs to make experimentation okay again?
I think what they're talking about on the EU level is regulatory sandboxes. That's the term where you actually can be challenge the different policies and rules and try new things. That could be against the policy that's in place right now. So that's important, I think, too. But it's hard to. That's a culture that you can't. It's bad. It's always bad to. I know some companies are trying to sort of encourage people to try new things, and people get prizes for the best failure this week and stuff like that. But you have to really mean it, so I think that's a difficult question, and it's really hard to. Sometimes if you're dealing with people's education or people's lives, it's. Experimenting sounds
scary,
very
wrong.
Yeah.
For some industries, like if you want to do music recommendations, it doesn't matter that much if you recommend the wrong song.
No,
I've seen really angry people getting recommended Danish rap songs when they hate it, but it doesn't at least kill them.
No.
No, but for others, as you say,
it's
but this is one of the headaches, right?
Yeah.
Because it comes with the territory to understand how to make use of data and AI. So how to deal with that? That is a big.
But I guess the question is really how do we enable innovation in a proper way, and how politicians can do that properly, or how we can set the right incentives or the preconditions.
It's preconditions, incentives, sandbox environments, because experimentation in the wrong way is not what I mean. But if we learn from the medical industry, it's super regulated, so in one way bad. But they, of course, needed to have a structured way, understanding how we do trial 1, trial 2, trial. So there's a process for innovation that we have deemed robust enough.
I think what you're basically asking is connected to regulation in general, and perhaps we should go there if that's okay.
Yeah, but I was thinking about one thing. This I don't know how he gets that to work. The Daniel Ek's healthcare initiative, and I think that could probably be one thing that you actually ask people to participate in. Innovation, which he is actually doing. I guess once you get there, you have to sign a lot of papers that you get.
Service, do whatever you want with my data.
Exactly, but that's my decision to do it. And I think a lot of people who would, like, I'm willing to do it because I think if that could help somebody else or maybe help me in the future, I'm fine. I don't have, like, but of course, I guess people can be afraid that it could be used by insurance companies or so there are risks, of course. But still, I think maybe that's the way to the people, because that's where it gets sensitive, when it's people you're doing. But if you have, like, get some kind of consent from a group of people to try something new, maybe that's a way of doing it.
Yeah, but I think and of course we have now areas where this always will be a huge problem. But then I think we have other areas where it's more about rethinking how we test and do things, sample or small box, or we need to invest in pros of concepts. It should not be real, it should not be in production, but we need to understand that's the core operating model. The process needs to have an ideation and validation prototyping stage into it. If I look at public sector, a lot of it is like line operations. One process we do it this way, but where is the innovation? Where is the sandbox? How do you do sandboxing in education? How do you do sandboxing in infrastructure? Of course it's done, right? But I think this is also part of this problem, when we want to invest and when we want to build policy around this, is how will we tackle experimentation? It needs to be okay, it needs to be incentivized, it needs to be structured. Back to innovation, right?
But I think also, like, if you look at getting, like, we don't want kids to be drawn into the criminal gangs. And you have social services and you have schools and you probably have a lot of data about these kids. So you could probably, by that data, figure out what's successful. And you don't have to experiment because you could use historic facts and start from there. Maybe that's a way of doing it because but then of course that's sensitive data you have of all these children, and how do we make people feel confident that the data is not, you can't track it to one specific person.
Speaking about that specific problem, about trying to be a bit more preventive when it comes to criminal gangs and kids getting drawn into it. What's your view on sharing data between authorities or organizations in general? Should we improve it, increase it?
I think it's if we really want to tackle those issues, there's no alternative than sharing. Like it right now, it's between schools and the social services, and between the medical services, the social services, and the police. I think it's we don't like. There's no other way than sharing what we know about these kids, and also maybe data that's not personalized as well, to see patterns and to help all the different parts do what, like, the thing that they do the best way they can do it. And I think we need to examine the data from all the different. I think that we don't have a choice.
It's well said. And I remember, I've worked a lot with GDPR and different private organizations in the past, and there are a lot of technical solutions you can do to still preserve privacy. I mean, we have this in Spotify, we call it pseudo-anonymization. And it's a very simple technique that simply anonymize basically user data, so you can't really see, unless you have a special map, this unique identifier that you don't know who it is. It's actually connected to this personal number or whatnot. But if you remove it, you have no idea what the data is. But you can still use the data, and it can still comply with GDPR, and you can still be very, compliant with the regulation. And I think if you simply apply these kind of techniques also between authorities that we have in Sweden, we could have privacy while still finding value from data in a much greater sense.
Yeah.
And I just realized when we talk about this example, when I refer to experimentation, I refer to experimentation on this super, super granular level of building data and AI systems, where you need to basically try yourself way forward to this and then test it with the regulators. Is this okay? And now we have a challenge that I'm really down on micro level now, that we don't get the project started. We don't know how to get started because everything becomes super big. There is no funding that allows me to, what we all say, you want to think big, but you want to start small and scale fast. But when it comes to policy, big spending, Karolinska or whatever you take it as an example, it becomes mega programs, mega projects, which is really, really hard to succeed with when in reality you want a bold vision and you want to start small, scale fast. And this is really hard.
We need to move on here, but time is flying away here a bit. And,
but it is okay.
Yes, yes. and we have a large number of questions that we'd love to get.
This is so fun, though.
Yeah, but can I ask a question? I was just when you look at the big like business organizations and you're trying to like change. What's the biggest sort of what do people say that like the största hinder?
Biggest blockers.
Biggest blockers, yeah.
For what? For sharing data?
No, for innovation.
So
like
we take now a company that I work with, and let's not name names. And what is the biggest blocker? Wow, don't get me started. but
open a Pandora's box. I think you can speak about this.
I'm super passionate about this topic, and my hypothesis is the same, but it's used in different levels. My hypothesis, I have thought about this a lot. I'm going to boil it down to a simple idea that we frame as we have on quite tactical level. We are lacking. I use the term business intrapreneurs. So if you think about people who are inside an organization, who has the know-how on the business side, the domain side, how to innovate and how to orchestrate change and innovation, because it's a multifaceted problem. Can you get the budget? Can you get the resources? Can you do the selling to the stakeholders? Can you then get the tech people? Can you organize a project? And there's very, very few people in the domains, in the business, who has this know-how. Okay. That's, I think, if you're going to nail me down for the number one problem, I would frame it like that. Okay. It's not a tech problem.
No.
Probably. Yes.
So these are the guys that are getting the things moving, and then you have then you have change in culture when you want to go big. But what will instigate? Who needs to be there in order to move this train forward?
Yeah, I can speak about this topic as well
but
for another hour, and
what would you say?
But it's so many examples. The Kodak moment, with the big Kodak company that went bankrupt in 1 year after being the biggest company in cameras for like so many decades, and they had the innovation in place already in the 1980s, and in 2008, I believe they completely crashed because they missed out, even though they had the innovation in the company. And for companies that don't enable innovation to happen internally, they will fail. It's just a matter of time. So to truly enable innovation to happen throughout the company, in every team, I think it's also, we speak a lot about the hub and spoke kind of ideas here. You should, of course, enable innovation to happen throughout every kind of development team that you have throughout an organization, but it may also need some extra incentives. It may also need some kind of
central investments.
Yes, some kind of centralized kind of structure to enable innovation to take place. And I think this, if you combine these two and also enable people to have innovation, and innovation happen not in the mainstream users. So if you take a Spotify example, if we take the mainstream users that listen on music in a certain case, but for people that are a bit strange and may listen to something called dansband, which I actually added that to Spotify, that genre, so I'm proud of that.
He's a dansband fan. It's a huge joke. This is a huge joke.
But in any case, the innovation usually happens in the outliers, and that was certainly the case with the digital camera, and no one thought that would ever be a success. But you need to truly, allow these kind of outliers to flourish and give them a chance.
But we should move on. But after work, let's come back to, because I want to answer you off camera.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. And let's take one boring topic just to get it properly answered, and then we move to more fun, philosophical, societal kind of questions. That's okay. And boring, I shouldn't say boring, but regulation. So it's of course super important that we preserve the privacy of the citizens that we do have, and we also need to have regulation to ensure that technologies are not abused in bad ways. and still, then not hamper innovation. And there are so many different examples here of different regulations, everything from e-privacy, GDPR, upcoming AI Act, and whatnot. How should we phrase this question properly? What do you think the proper way is to have regulation that still, safeguard citizens and the rights that we have while still preserving innovation? Super hard question, I know.
Yeah, I know.
But we start in the general way.
But I think I think one thing is to to get a system in place where you can share like a lot of data that can't be connected to a certain person.
Right,
anonymizing data in a secure way, so we can find and actually demand from companies and whoever's working with developing new AI. That's absolutely that's a must. And then I think, for example, the what I've seen from the suggestions in the AI Act, one thing is to actually go to the sort of output level. What can you do and what can't you do? Like the social scoring, what I understand is going to be a no. And I think maybe that could be a smart way of doing it. I haven't seen all the background.
We've spoken about the AI Act a number of times here, and it seems everyone is saying exactly what you just said. And it's so strange to me that we don't do it, because I think most people are saying, why don't we have regulation on the use case instead of the technology? One example that I had is, if I have a hammer here, hammers can be used for a lot of good things, but I can also use the hammer to hit Henrik on the head. And that would be a nasty thing for me to do. So how do you have regulation to prevent that? Well, you don't, forbid or ban the hammer. You forbid the use case of, hurting Henrik or people. And I don't see why so many people now are, so focused on, in the AI Act, for example, to put regulation on the technology instead of the use case. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think the US way is the use going on the user side. So I think that's probably successful. But
UK is going that way, I think, more clearly.
And we needed the UK and the European Union. They were on our side.
Yes.
And I think we got lost after they left, and there haven't been a strong voice for this doing things different. But I think it's protectionism as well. There's a lot of they see that especially the big US companies are becoming so powerful, and they want to try to limit their power in the European Union. Maybe try to encourage companies to compete. I think that's ridiculous. But I think that's one. And then I think also people are afraid. And then if you look at, like, everybody wants to be re-elected, and there's politicians in the European Union as well, right. Which means that if the media if everything is on all the problems and all the scary parts and how it can be used to of course it's the will for us as policymakers to regulate will be, because that's what our voters seem to want, because that's what they're.
But I find it really scary, because I don't think this is what the voters want. I think we don't. I think back to, if you have a black and white Twitter debate on this doesn't get uncovered, right? But in reality, it's super simple. Are you going to regulate the hammer or the use of the hammer? It's that simple, right? But
I think it's a very good analogy. I'm going to use that, if you don't mind.
So it is really that simple. But I think we have good experts, even Swedish people who have been part of, coming with advice on this. But I don't really see it going in I thought we would start moving it in the right direction, but I think it's going in the wrong direction even worse.
Yeah, the latest version of the AI Act, they're speaking about these kind of general AI, or what they use different. I think they have two terms. They have foundational AI models, and they have
they had to add generative AI with a hurry. But they didn't have that in.
Yeah, but they had some even before ChatGPT was the big thing it was. But they are now. I don't recall exactly, so I could be wrong here, of course. But they are trying to find some kind of difference between foundational models and generative models and general purpose AI. That's the term they use.
Yeah.
General purpose AI. And it seems that if you have general purpose AI, it's basically defined as high risk. And I could be wrong here, but that's my view of it. And that basically means that any kind of general purpose AI, like ChatGPT, would be basically impossible for normal companies to work with because it's defined as high risk. This is a rather technical question, but do you have any thoughts about this? Because I think everyone agrees that having regulation that is adapted to the extreme, fast-moving technology field that AI is something that we need. Mm-hmm. In that, I agree with Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and Max Tegmark and so many others. But they need to be implemented properly, right?
We want to harness all the good things as well.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, but I think it's people are a little bit scared about if of course if Elon Musk says please press the pause button, that's then people get even more scared.
But that's because he wanted to catch up. We already realized that.
Yes, of course.
He's actually starting up new companies, by the way. So
I think he actually is leading. It's just that he wasn't using generative AI that much, but he was using the other type of AI that actually is what's needed for
But
AGI.
cynically, we joked about this in other fora, that he's just doing it because he's actually starting up a generative thingy, and now he wants to catch up.
He's going to do the truth GPT, as you call it.
Yeah, and then he's starting up XAI, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a double standard.
Yeah, so and I hope people see, and then of course, if we press pause in the Western world, China and Russia, and they are not going to, so it doesn't really make any sense at all. So it's
and nor the criminal gangs or the antagonists that we do have, right?
No, but I think the AI Act is going to be a tricky one because of there are. Like the protectionism from France and Germany, and also you have as I said, I think that a lot of general public, or at least what we see in the media, is like scared, and then of course our answer is to regulate. And but I think that's what I've been saying as well with these seminars, that it's important for the sector that works with AI to say, but if you do this like the way you're suggesting right now, then we will not be able to find new cures for cancer, because this is going to limit our use of the data that we need to do this. And I think everybody's talking about the cost if something gets exposed, but we're not talking about the costs of what we can't do.
I like this.
So and I think that's really and that's something that could actually affect policymakers as well, and that's something that you need to do. The industry needs to do, and also the people who are using AI today need to do as well, to make sure that people understand that there is actually probably a huge cost
of not doing it.
Of not doing it.
I like this, and Kai has several people. The opportunity cost here cannot be neglected, and is it ethical to not save millions of lives? Is that ethical?
No. So it's like
it's a crazy idea, right?
It was Kai that said that.
Kai that
once.
said
yeah,
it.
He said something. AI, if we don't use it, I mean, basically, how
moral can it be to not save the millions of lives you can save? Yeah. How can this be moral?
Yeah, no. I heard a quote from, I haven't heard it myself. A doctor said that right now we're protecting the healthy people, and we're letting the sick people die, and that's because that we're protecting the privacy of the healthy people and letting the sick people die, and that's not. And maybe that's a story that needs to be told more often, and get. I think maybe that's scary. So maybe that you can get like the media to write about. Well, if we do this, we won't be able to refine the system that finds breast cancer earlier, and also we can't use it on other cancer.
And if we have a public sector on the brink of ruin, and we understand the trajectory of how many people will go into pension in public sector and how this is going to look like in 20 years, we cannot afford
not to do
this stuff. We cannot
Exactly.
afford to not do this stuff. And this conversation, why isn't this part of the debate even? Because
I think we also need to say that, of course, we need to have regulation.
Yeah,
I think that there is a need for that, and especially what you said before as well. There are some very, very concrete and obvious use cases that we should regulate, which is like social scoring and autonomous weapons, etc. So, but why don't we simply do that then?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, the use of the hammer, not the hammer itself.
Yes.
And I think that's really simple and easy to say that's the road we need to. It's going to be very interesting to be at this EU meeting next week.
Yeah.
We're supposed to participate. They were very hesitant at getting. They said it was it was only the secretary who wanted to go, I guess, and his staff. But we got invited, so it's going to be interesting to hear because there's going to be a lot of different European experts, and I think that's going to be interesting to hear what they say.
But I think it's a very simple. Read the AI Act carefully and look at. Is it the use case or is it the hammer? Is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
very
that's very simple. And exactly. And then if we want to be like we have, you can get life sentences for murder if you use the hammer to kill you, he would be sentenced to life. Okay, so put on really harsh fines for companies that would bankrupt the company if they got caught using it.
You can this is how you steer it.
Yes.
Extremely hard bankrupt. You know.
And like but that's for the parts that are more on the business side, of course. But then if you use it for autonomous weapons or whatever, then you would be jail time criminal. Yeah.
Awesome. Should we move a bit more into philosophical kind of questions? That doesn't have really good, yes or no answers. It's more a matter of opinions. But I think it's fun to just speak about.
Okay, yeah, that's it. It's interesting. It's very AI is a lot of philosophical questions around it. So,
but one that we spoke a lot about is what we call the AI divide, and we is basically a pun of the words from the digital divide. And with the AI divide, we rather refer to more the few extremely large tech companies that have all the data, they have all the researchers now from academia and whatnot, they have all the money, they are the richest companies in the world, and they make money by using data and AI in a way to automate their business plans. So there are a few selected companies that basically are concentrating the power, and it's going, I would argue, faster and faster, like OpenAIs of the world that have ChatGPT and now Microsoft and then Google, of course, and others. And this kind of AI divide that lets a few selected companies and people like Elon Musk and whatnot to have an extreme amount of power and wealth.
And know-how.
I mean, it's good for them, but the problem is if the rest of the world, if the rest of the companies, if the rest of the people do not keep up with that and get increasingly farther behind, that could potentially be a problem. Would you agree?
I think that's hard. I think their wealth is not a problem I think that they are doing, and if you look at what their companies has brought to us, there's a lot of good things there.
Yes.
And
so we shouldn't be jealous about them. We should be happy for them.
Yeah, you can be jealous about their wealth, of course. They have, but it's not. I think that they have. It's not that they have done a lot of good things for society with their different solutions, and I think that's. I have not. That's not the problem. But I can, if the power is more of a scary thing. Like if you own Twitter, you can control a lot of the information out there. That's more scary than the wealth and the big companies. And then also, I think I was thinking that on the way here, that one thing that's happened also is that the U.S. had Donald Trump as president, and for me it was at least, and I think for a lot of people, was shocked that the democracy in the U.S. was fragile in a way, and the biggest ones, tech companies, they are U.S. based, and I think maybe that also got people more scared of the divide than we were before. But how to change it? I think the way the EU is doing, trying to block these companies, is probably not the right way, because we could do. we need to be the environment where we can grow, not companies who compete in the same arena, but who do other things and are successful. So we divide the power that way by doing different things. So that I think the globalization and codependency is good for world peace, but it's right now it's sort of going the other way around, which is kind of sad.
But the way I usually frame the problem I think there is a problem with the AI divide, and it is not really to focus on the problem that something is created or of the few that is leading this. The real problem is how massive we have of the people of the rest of the world not catching up. Like when there becomes a bigger and bigger gap in the productivity frontier, what can be done, and we have companies becoming. So I'm not really pointing the finger at the people leading this on this side of the divide. I think the problem is problematic when you get to a point where big companies or societies more or less is up for disruption, or we come to a point where someone said, I think it was Kai again, we are so in the hands of, we have put ourselves in the hands of these companies. We don't have any cloud infrastructure, and now we're not going to have any generative AI infrastructure. It's a little bit like we don't have electricity in Sweden. We need to import electricity from US. That's what's scary, that we don't. So I'm not so mad about that they are successful. I'm mad about that we are screwing up the game.
Yeah, we are big time.
And this is the AI divide, which is a little bit like, damn it, you are putting us in the point where we should import electricity from Russia and AI from US, and we have no sovereignty. We have no sort of, these are core resources that we are now, I don't know how we think. This is the problem, because we are so vulnerable in the geopolitical landscape. And someone said very simply, an AI will not replace you. Someone else that knows AI will replace you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that becomes a problem when we are talking about Sweden to the rest of the world. So I think the divide is, us. We are the problem that we are, if we're going, So I'm not really blaming these guys. I'm saying, do you see what I mean?
We need to catch up. Yeah, exactly. And how I think we could because it's like we are the unicorn capital of the world. One of the Google
exactly.
managers
we have a lot of successful Swedish scale-ups like Spotify or Skype or Minecraft or King we have a large number of successful startups.
So it could be done again. Like we can get another Spotify, but in this area. But we need to. The problem is, why don't we? Why don't we?
We need to have more politicians that incentivize it.
No, but I think
let's go there. We didn't incentivize Spotify. They did this.
No, but I think Sweden actually is one of the better countries, I would argue, in Europe, at least for the startup scene and how we can enable innovation happen. Yes,
we
I would argue.
But not right now. We're as you said, we're throwing talent out of the country instead of.
So I was just I'm going to get you bite that one, but you took it before me. Thank you.
It's still a brain drain, but if you just do statistics on it, I think per capita we have so many successful startups and scale-ups here. But still, it's.
But let's go here. I think you're asking the right question, and this is the real debate of what we want to have. This on the table now. Let's talk about this now. This is the real question.
Which one?
You said, why don't we?
Why don't we? Exactly. Why don't we?
Yeah.
That's the real question, right?
We should have and I think that's. If you ask any politician, we want more Spotifys and more Klarna, and we want more companies that are successful.
Yeah. Let's put more regulation on the table and see what happens. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't.
But actually, you said something that I didn't know that, because if we think we want to be more successful here, is this something that we can? We need to put a really strong governmental institute in this, and this we're going to have governmental driven innovation, or do we see it? How do we foster a climate where the unicorns pop up like mushrooms? And I think you said the last one, right?
Yes, definitely.
Two different things, right? Because there are arguments, we need to have an institution who can have a lot of money and we will innovate.
There are too many government institutions and no. Yeah.
I mean,
And they
it's
don't-
rather easy to see what's happening. I mean,
No, I want you to finish that.
No, but
Where
there
are
are
you going with
there are
this?
too
What do you
many.
think?
But I'm thinking that for one thing, there's too many institutions working with digitalization and also with AI. So we need to sort of consolidate and maybe scale down the government, and then see how we can do more initiatives to get those unicorns to grow. What do we need to do? And I think one thing is that when I went to the Royal Institute of Technology and talked to some. They have this. KTH Innovation. So I was talking to some of the companies that have startups there, and they brought up this that we can't stay when we're finished our education, and the so that we can't do that. We can't throw the talent out. We need to.
But you know, one of the simplest ways we have already solved this question. By
Okay,
the way,
great, thanks.
more than a year ago.
Okay, why did you tell us?
No, not you, but if I tell you now, it's very simple, because when you what is it that creates an environment for startups? A couple of things. Talent. You need to have a very, very healthy and speedy, fast way of getting talent. Second, capital. So basically, the core topic now is that we have a system run either by you go down the VC route, okay, and then basically you're giving your company away. And how should I put it?
VC route.
Venture capital.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Venture capital.
Yep.
And the venture capital is not really building healthy companies. It's building portfolios that can get one healthy company.
It could also build healthy companies. It can.
No. What I'm trying to say is this: that there is a profile of companies that can go the VC route, and there are many other companies that are really nice companies, but they're not really. They're going to be great for Sweden, but they're not the same, right? But you need capital, and then the argument could be, okay, and then we can have funding from Vinnova or something like that, and then you look at the funding here, too small and too fragmented, and really you can't really do anything about it. So how do you fund? How do you get capital for startup that allows the entrepreneurs to stay in Sweden and also to own their companies? That's an interesting one.
Is that something that I don't see a government agency with capital?
You know what? There is actually an awesome report ordered by the White House recently. It came out in January. They spoke specifically about the AI divide and exactly this problem, and how they can enable more, for one, academics, but also startups and companies that are not tech giants to catch up on these techniques. I think they had an awesome model for it. It's called something like the National AI Research Task Force or something. Mm-hmm.
You should send this report.
I know, yeah, but you can just Google it.
Yeah.
But still, they basically are asking for billions of dollars from the government in US to enable this to happen. And they do that in a way that I think you are speaking about all the time. Not by building a centralized infrastructure, for example. Infrastructure is something that we need to have. If nothing else for the public sector in Sweden, it would be we need to have something that is not built on the US or Chinese cloud services. And that's missing in Sweden and Europe in general. But what they are saying is, okay, let's not as a government build a government infrastructure. Let's not try to be a private sector, cloud company because we're a government. But instead, let us find and let other companies come in and build it together with us. So they have this kind of like a broker kind of setup. I think actually what they have proposed there is really beautiful, and I actually wish that the Swedish government could look more into that and see if we can borrow some of the ideas from that.
And I just highlighted the mechanisms that is needed, but I don't have the solution. If it's a governmental startup funding, okay, that's Vinnova, But, but I think you are spot on understanding how to create the right climate.
Yeah. But then I have one thing that I think is a problem in Sweden as well. It's lagen om offentlig upphandling. The law on official procurement. I don't know what's called.
LOU.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that's something that they brought up at KTH Innovation as well, and where some of the startups had AI applications for the public sector, and they were like,
no way for them to get
for them to get in. And I think that's there's a lot of money in public sectors and a lot of problems to be solved, and a lot of processes to be that could be more effective. But I think that law needs to be updated so that it can allow for some of the money there to go into joint ventures with maybe not a startup in the early stages, but that's going up to upscaling.
No, but the whole LOU is not organized for agile thinking. It's organized for projects, big things. It's very hard to innovate. So it can be done. I even seen white papers how to innovate around LOU from public servants. It's how bad it is, right?
Yeah, I know. So that's I think that's also because that's where we need a lot of the innovation as well within the public sector. I think the business side is if we don't regulate, so it's impossible for them. They can find ways because there's going to be a business case. There's money to be earned, but the public sector is need to be more agile, and I think LOU is one big hurdle stop.
If you help facilitate this to have a better lagen om offentlig upphandling, I think that you would help public sector and a lot of startups at once.
Yeah.
So
I want to follow that motion when it comes.
That would be awesome. Should we move?
It was actually we haven't thought about that part in our report, so that was really good discussion because that's something we need to address definitely.
Because if you start looking at it, talent, money, sourcing of technology and all that, and then you follow where are the big blockers?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we have fundamental blockers
yeah.
in our regulations today? Because we have fundamental blockers. This was one example, right?
Definitely.
Should do the SWOT analysis, the strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. This is like a threat. That we have.
And I find this, I have an hypothesis. I'm working with a PhD on these topics, Mikael Klingvall, and we have a very simple idea that isn't these problems, we call it fractal, that you can look at this on a pattern level and then you need to solve it down here. How do we get them to collaborate Python and Latin? Is it the same problem, but you need to understand it differently as we move up the bigger and bigger and bigger, and then ultimately we think it is. The solutions is different, but when you come from the macro to the micro, it's the same fundamental patterns and problems, but you're defining what is a product, what is the problem. And this is very interesting then, because then potentially what can you learn from what becomes clear in what is the solution on the micro level, that should give you the ideology, fundamental ideas on things which direction we need to go. So our policy we make up here needs to support these patterns. Yeah. So if it's fractal, it's ways to actually see through see the wood for all the trees. To see through this. I think it is. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Awesome. And time is over 2 hours now, and will you want to come closer?
And I was scared that we wouldn't be able to talk for 2 hours.
No. We haven't even.
I'm just trying to prioritize here when the most important questions. We have so many that we will not be able to cover. But you mentioned the pause, the moratorium on AI, the thing that Elon Musk, Max Tegmark, and others mentioned. And let me do a quick intro on this as well, because some people argue that the progress in AI, especially, is exponential, meaning, it's been around for 70 years, more or less, but it's going, super, super slow, and suddenly it's exploding. It's actually been exploding in research for quite some time, in many years, and especially since 2012 and forward, I would say, with deep learning, etc. But now it's been exploding as well with generative AI in the last 2 years, and then the last 1 year, or half a year since November, I guess, since ChatGPT, when the media and non-research people also saw the awesome potential that we're seeing and the free service that allowed anyone, even non-technical people, to be able to try it out and see what actually can be done. Now, I guess you mentioned the pause of AI. Do you think that's a good idea, or what's your thinking here? Or are you afraid of the exponential speed of AI development?
No, not really. Maybe I'm very naive. Maybe in some cases I see the good things and see that we need to get them fast and scale up. But I think if we say that we are the good guys and want to use AI for good things, and we hit the pause button as we were talking about before, the bad guys won't.
Yeah.
And so I think then the risk is that we won't be able to sort of regulate the bad things that they have developed because we're behind and we don't really understand what they're doing. So I think that would be kind of dangerous. And if you look at like all the possibilities, I think we should be grateful that it's actually moving fast. And if you look at great things that could be done, I don't think we should be. I'm not actually scared.
I'm awesome, and and
should I be?
No, but I think you phrased it very well.
Are you scared?
I think one thing that I'm potentially a bit afraid about is the race between the tech giants, about Microsoft and Google especially. But now everyone else is saying, I have my own big generative AI. Every tech giant is coming up. Google and Microsoft were starting it. Now everyone is coming up with their own version, and it's becoming this kind of race. They are potentially releasing AI services before they are properly vetted, validated, verified.
And it's the mechanics of an extreme arms race going on right in front of us. If you really understand how cutthroat this is between 3 or 4 companies, right? And potentially that the argument is that the stakes is so high that they don't test stuff the way they should.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's
and I think
if you look at Elon Musk and Tegmark, who really knows this stuff, they understand the arms race approach. Now, if we are cynical, Elon Musk wants to get in on this arms race, so he wants his friends.
You can't say get in. He's leading.
Yeah.
And he was part of starting OpenAI. Yeah. And what he's doing with Tesla now and with Twitter,
you're right.
and then
he's not out.
He's leading AI. Is not want to get in, but it sounds like he wants to get in.
But I still find it very interesting that Elon's motivations for writing on that page. Max Tegmark, I fully understand. Yeah. But Elon, I can only understand it.
If he was leading I don't know.
No, okay, let me,
but he's not.
I can steel man, even though I think it's the wrong thing to do, I can still steel man the argument of the pause. And I listened to a long interview with Max Tegmark on this. And I think he actually made me understand why they still think, because I admire Max Tegmark a lot. And Elon Musk actually as well. And he phrased it well. And he said, if we don't do something, the race will continue. There is no way for a publicly traded company to say to its shareholders, let's stop our technology development. There is no way. They will get fired directly from the CEO position, and the board will get fired. So it's super hard for a company, and usually the leaders and the founders have really good intentions. They don't want harm for people, consumers, the society, but they will get fired if they don't do whatever they can to maximize the profit of the shareholders. And then, if you think that, how can we potentially help them? How can we help the big companies that are under pressure from the shareholders to do whatever they can to still say, no, let's do it slower. Let's do it with validation. Let's properly regulate things, or make sure that it doesn't harm people unnecessarily. Well, perhaps we need to have some kind of moral incentives where people come together and say, it's okay to go slow. It's okay not to rush. It's okay to not publish something next month. It's okay to say on Twitter and a press release, no, we're not going to release this new top model because we care about safety. Yeah. I mean, if you phrase it like that, it actually makes some kind of sense, right? But I don't think a moratorium is the right way to do it. But I think if we come together to say, companies that we can trust, we will value more.
Yeah,
I think the future will be more in terms of trusting companies than whoever can build the safest self-driving car. It's if you trust the company that will matter. So.
Yep.
Yeah, but ultimately now your Steelman is so good, so you almost convinced me. By the way,
Exactly.
What do you think yourself? Because it is a really to put something on pause. I mean,
and pause is not the right term, but people should not judge companies because they don't push out a new AI model quickly. They should judge companies if they can show that they have validated properly.
Yeah.
If you instead have that kind of incentives, then they can rush all they want. They can spend any kind of investment they want. But if they cannot show that they have properly validated and tested this service properly.
It's not about speed or how aggressive you invest in it. It's actually do it, but do it right.
Yeah.
But then you have punishing the use of the hammer. Could that be a way? Like if they don't validate, if they send out things to the market that is not validated and it causes harm, the price will be so high that they will. It sounds horrible.
It's back to the use of the hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
This is exactly how you
and
solve
that would
this
actually make them slow down because it would be harmful to the shareholders.
Fantastic.
If they
now
did.
we have AI regulation.
Perfectly.
Yeah, but I was like, it sounded horrible. But I think that's the only way because you can't stop. Pause button is not a possibility. But
having the right regulation in place.
Yeah. So making it so expensive if they actually send something out that harms people that will cost them too much.
Yes.
On the level of bankruptcy. No, it's hard to bankrupt Microsoft.
Can't you make this happen, Maria?
No,
I think that's not on my watch.
but
it's not a Swedish issue. It has to be on.
You can be a role model, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. But I think, but the problem is that since these big companies, most of them are US based. Probably the regulation. On the other hand, they have they sue people for everything in the US. But I don't know if that's probably not enough for this kind of race. But I think the regulation has to be in the US, and because if we start doing it here and we don't really have those, it could be actually stopping our unicorns.
So now you open up the real question. Is any of these regulations any useful if it's not any way we can do a global regulation on this?
Yeah, that would
how will this work if it's not a global consensus on these things?
But that would be difficult if the Western world maybe, but you can't include China and Russia in this. It's not a possibility. So that's
terrorist organizations.
Terrorist organizations. So it's really really hard.
So this is sort of the pink elephant in the room, I think.
Yeah, since all these products and these companies are global, it makes sense to have a global regulation. But there's no, that's possible.
What's the body for it?
Exactly, there's no body to do that.
No. But technology can also be used to prevent and create safety. So perhaps if we just invest also in safety against abuses, against propaganda, against autonomous weapons, then perhaps we can still have the right development, even though some of the other people don't care about the human-centered way, if you call it that. Okay, let's try to close this up here.
This is so much fun, but we should try to be better as well.
Yeah,
we've been once over 3 hours.
Yeah,
okay,
but we shouldn't. 2.5 hours.
It looked like okay, I'm ready.
No, I'm not.
I'm joking.
We
should. I think we should find the way. No, we should find maybe one more question when the way out
of. It's a bit nasty question, but still, let's do
nasty question. It's the last one.
A mean one? No,
it's not a mean one, but it will only have a bad answer. Okay, anyway, I go.
Take another one then.
But it's a fun one.
It's a fun one then. Okay. Try it, and then Maria can ignore it.
People speak about AGI, the artificial general intelligence, and also about things like singularity, and that basically means that at some point, even with ChatGPT that we have today, which can produce code, it could potentially be connected to itself, meaning you don't need humans to program how the system works anymore. Meaning it could actually start to determine itself that this is how I should operate, and then you remove human from the loop. And that means that even though it may be super stupid, simple system, it can start to quickly iterate, and just faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And at some point, it will become super intelligent.
Science fiction, the
Yep.
stuff we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a Skynet moment if you believe in Terminator or whatnot. But are you afraid about this? Do you think it's something we need to think about?
So now we're into
What's your
the
thoughts? It's philosophical questions. I know.
philosophical.
Yeah, but I
fun.
think it's. I think that's impossible to. Or that's possible. We need to have that in the when we discuss this. That this is actually. I think it's not. It's not science fiction, if I understand correctly.
No,
It could actually be done.
Yes, it could be done. Yes.
And I don't think anybody would really want to see that. So I guess that's something that we need to take into account with the regulation and also when we discuss this. I think that's important.
Awesome. With that, I think we should move to close. And
we talked AGI and singularity with the riksdagsledamot. I think that was.
But I
super
need
cool.
to I understood when you said it, but I need to focus on learning more about the AI. And I had a meeting with Vinnova, and she started talking about quant, and I was like, okay,
Quantum
here we go.
mechanics,
Now I need to deep dive.
It's one of my favorite topics.
Yes, I need. I'm not. I haven't read enough about it yet to be able to have any discussions about it. Sorry.
Yeah, but there are more interesting topics to learn about before. I think.
Yes.
I think.
So much to learn.
I mean,
That's interesting. I think
No,
that's
but it's
fun.
more
open, quantum mechanics. One of the founders of quantum mechanics was Richard Feynman in 1940s and 50s, and he said, I think, something awesome, which is, if you think you believe you understand how quantum mechanics works, you do not understand quantum mechanics.
Okay, that's.
So you should be happy. Even he doesn't understand.
He doesn't understand. Okay,
No.
so that's not.
So there are other topics that could bring more value to study first.
And it's
this
not
is my argument.
Yeah, and it will not be as influential as AI will be anyway. So
Okay.
focus on understanding AI, I would argue. Anyway, Maria, what's happening next in your life? Privately, professionally? Anything
Well, I'm turning
specific?
60 now,
Yes.
so that's a big thing. No, but I'm having a party and going to Italy with my husband and parents. So that's going to be really. We love traveling, so that's going to be really, really great.
This summer?
No, we leave on the 14th of May actually, so it's not that far away. So it's going to be, and it's 25 degrees in Italy. I just checked, so it's.
Sounds awesome.
So that's what happened. Then I have 4-year term, so I'm hoping that I will keep working with the same issues this term, and then in a couple of years I need to decide if I'm going to run again or not. So I haven't.
But you're having fun now.
I am.
Yeah.
My husband says, "I know you're going to run again. You're having too much fun."
Because I can tell this from this conversation, you know.
But I really do, and then and I think getting to, like, I meet interesting people like you too all the time, and get to speak to experts everywhere, and it's learn new things. And I also work with some really great people at Parliament right
But
now.
you're still very young. You know, think about Biden. He's running again.
Yeah, no, he's 80. Yeah, no.
82 when he will
You have a
be.
long career.
We'll see. We have an ageism in Sweden. That's not like there's. I think it's if you look at the average age of our parliament, it's really very, very low compared to most countries. I think the youngest one is 22 or 23. I think, yeah. But they're really good politicians. It's not that. It's just that it's hard when you're getting older. It's.
But I find this also interesting now because of course we need a parliament that has a balance and we can have all the different views. But I think also. Going back to what we said earlier, this is what I have experienced, is that I did not understand how the mechanics of getting stuff done worked when I was 20. You can teach it and you can learn it, but then you need to then team up in different ways, right? So because to really move things that are complex is very hard. And it's navigation, to put it the least, right?
Experience helps you a little bit.
Experience is maybe
It's undervalued, I would even argue.
Yeah, but it's and I was wondering what's going to happen like in work life. If you look at, like, I have friends who lost their jobs when they're 50, and it's almost impossible for them to even get an interview, even though they're highly qualified.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy,
It's absolutely crazy.
but then everybody's now saying that they can't find people to hire because they can't find competent people to hire. And I was thinking, but there's loads of people over 50 that's probably
really educated.
Yeah, and then it's also not acceptable to say that. Well, I have had this high position, but now I'm sort of I want to take it a little bit. Want to have more spare time, so I want to take a lower position at a lower salary. That's not.
It's not.
It's
So we
hard
have
to
so many things in our ways how we see this that stops us from doing obvious opportunities.
Yeah. But I think maybe the lack of talent or lack of people to hire will change that because they out of necessity. Either they have a person that was 50 years old in the seat, or they don't have anybody in the seat.
Last question.
We can't stop that.
No, sorry, we can't talk about that now. Sorry.
Last question, Maria. Is there anyone that you would recommend to this podcast? Someone that you would like for us to interrogate or speak to, that you would like to listen to?
And can I add to this? Help us to build a better opinion and a storyline and momentum around this by passing forward. We would really appreciate it to find introductions.
Yeah.
So because we have found overall a long format conversation can be very educational in many ways, or inspiring, and we are learning, and we want to better understand the real the real political the parliament. I think is the key here. Yeah. Not all the different departments. Yes, but even here
how it works. Yeah, but I was back to the educators. Do you have to just? I could probably see if I can find a teacher who could talk about the possibilities.
Ooh. Teacher, that we can talk digitalization, data, and AI with, who can inspire us.
Yeah, but I was thinking. I'm not. I need to see. I know a lot of the teachers in Sollentuna who did a lot of good jobs with digitalization as that, but I have no idea how much they've talked about or used AI. But and maybe their views on ChatGPT. That's such a big debate about. I think that would be kind of interesting to talk about the possibilities with digitalization and AI in schools.
Digitalization is a good starting point, but of course.
Yeah, and then also because I think that's the narrative needs to change so that people see that there's actually real possibilities for kids to actually perform better and learn more and what they need to. Yeah.
Maria, it's been a true pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I hope you will stay on for a short while. I know you have to head home as well, but we'd love to have some after work discussions as well off camera. So thank you very much for coming here. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really inspiring.
It was really fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. And 2 hours went really fast.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours? Wow.
2.5.
Wow.